Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're discussing the largest resort in the Aspen Quartet, Snowmass. Snowmass has a profound reputation for being one of the premier ski resorts for groomers in Colorado, which we'll delve into today. For this video, we'll go over some background information and cover the a-Elk campsite of the mountain. We'll work through the remainder of the mountain in the next two parts. So with that, let's begin an Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Aspen Snowmass. A bit of background before we dive into the mountain itself. Snowmass is located just outside the town of Aspen. If you're flying from out of town, the best way to get to Aspen is to fly into the local airport adjacent to Buttermilk Mountain. There are actually commercial flights into that airport, officially known as Aspen-Pitkin County, but they are on the pricier side. Flying into Denver is pretty cheap, but you're looking at a near 4-hour drive to Aspen, barring no delays. A good intermediate option is to fly into the Eagle County Airport, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive and tends to be cheaper than Aspen. Unless you're planning to only ski Snowmass, I'd recommend staying in the town of Aspen. You'll have a lot more to do, and the bus system is free and really good. Compared to Ajax, Highlands, and Buttermilk, which are all pretty close to each other, Snowmass feels a little bit more separated from its sister mountains since it's a 20-minute to 30-minute bus ride from town. Let's now talk more about the mountain specifically. Snowmass has one of the largest vertical drops in North America, clocking in at around 4,400 feet. Trust me, despite how horizontally stretched this trail map is, don't be deceived. You really feel this massive vertical with the sheer scale of some of the lifts and runs here. However, like most mountains with this large of a vertical drop, snow quality at the base is drastically different than at the top. The mountain is also very wide, although getting around isn't actually that bad. While it's not the worst map out there, the Snowmass trail map is not at all to scale in several spots and can be downright confusing. The runs are also way longer than they appear on the trail map, as briefly touched on a moment ago. Snowmass is pretty limited when it comes to beginner trails, but has a few options in the bottom half of the mountain. However, the beginner experience is on track to get revamped with some investments in the coming years, so this could very well change. If you're interested in learning about these potential changes, check out the video in the card at the top right of your screen. Intermediates are definitely the target demographic of Snowmass. There are so many fantastic intermediate pods here, and I'd 100% recommend Snowmass to any intermediate rider. Do note that some of the blues here are on the tougher side as compared to other ski resorts. Also, the majority of trails here seem to be on rotational grooming, which means they're groomed every couple days, not every night. This prevents them from getting true moguls, but they may still be a bit bumpy, so I definitely recommend checking the grooming report before each ski day. Snowmass lacks a bit in advanced terrain, but does have a few solid options. The mountain doesn't really have a reputation for extremes. However, as we'll see in upcoming parts, if you know where to look, you can easily find some gnarly lines. With all that out of the way, let's dive into the on-mountain experience. As you can see, Snowmass has a few out-of-base options. The two primary ones are the Village Express and a-Elk Camp Gondola. The a-Elk Camp Gondola and the a-Elk Camp Quad Chairlift have the same name, so to avoid confusion, I'll be referring to the a-Elk Camp Gondola as the Gondola and the Chairlift as a-Elk Camp. Both Village Express and the Gondola mainly serve as a means of getting higher on the mountain, rather than functioning as lappable lifts. Both of these get equally backed up in the morning, so I can't really recommend one or the other. I personally prefer starting my day at the Village Express since I feel you get access to a lot more terrain right off the bat. Now, for this season and onward, you now have a third out-of-base option, the Coney Express. Obviously, we can't definitively tell you right away how busy this lift will be in relation to the others, but based on previous experience at other resorts with similar projects, I predict that lines will be shorter at Coney than Village for at least these first couple seasons. If you're taking the bus and plan to start your day at Village Express, I'd recommend taking the bus past the base Village stop and all the way up to the Snowmass Mall stop. Getting off at the Snowmass Mall allows you to skip an otherwise pretty brutal hike through the village, and also gives you the option to traverse across to Coney. The final, lesser-known out-of-base option is located all the way over at Two Creeks. Even though there is a bus stop at Two Creeks, I don't remember my bus stopping there, so I believe you need a car to reach that base area. If you have the means, I'd 100% recommend starting your day there, since that lift gets 0 lines. For part A of this guide, we'll see what happens if you start with the gondola, and for part B, we'll look at the Village and Coney Expresses. There's a bunny hill lift called Assay Hill located right here at the base of the mountain. These two runs are good places to learn. However, due to the elevation, the snow here is often on the sketchier side. The most direct way to get here is to ride up the gondola to the mid-station and unload there. From here, you can just ski down to Assay Hill. If you continue up the gondola, you'll reach a-Elk Camp. Under the gondola, you have a few trails that mainly function as a means of getting back to the village at the end of the day. Funnel Bypass is, of course, the easiest way down. Funnel is always groomed, but given the sheer number of people who ride down it and its low elevation, it's no surprise that it's always icy. Eddie's Out is a less busy but narrower option through some beautiful aspen trees. West Fork takes you down to the Two Creeks lift. I believe Bottoms Up is on rotational grooming, but don't quote me on that. Adams Avenue is a road that lets you get all the way to the Village Express side. Gallivant is a road that takes you to the Alpine Springs lift. No Name is a quick little shot through the trees adjacent to the lower half of Slider. I'm pretty sure that at least one of these blue cruisers leading down to Two Creeks will always be groomed from top to bottom. These runs are extremely long and are a fun way to end the day. However, I don't really recommend lapping them due to their lower elevation unless you like slush for some sick reason. The Meadows lift is another bunny hill lift, and I'd recommend learning here over Assay Hill due to its higher elevation. I don't recall too large of a difference in crowds between the two lifts. Alright, now we get to the first legitimately good pod on this side of the mountain, Elk Camp. The Elk Camp runs are super similar to the Big Burn runs, although I do find Elk Camp a bit more mellow than Big Burn. The runs on the main face are all very lightly graded intermediate cruisers. Think Big Rock Park and Blue Sky Basin at Vail, but with even fewer trees and way more wide open and long. From top to bottom, these runs are around 1.5 miles long, making them some of the longest intermediate runs out there. In general, these runs have rotational grooming. However, Gunner's View and Sandy Park are the most consistently groomed runs. This part of the map is pretty messy, but when Sandy Park merges onto Turkey Trot, it becomes ultra flat, so try to retain some speed. Bear Bottom, Grey Wolf, and Bull Run are typically left ungroomed. However, these runs don't really develop moguls, which makes them great places to try out some basic off-piste skiing. Longshot and the Burnt Mountain Glades require a 10-ish minute hike to reach, but it's well worth it. Longshot is the longest run at the resort at nearly 3.5 miles and almost 3,000 vertical feet. This run is almost always ungroomed and absolutely exhausting. However, despite its mellow pitch, I'm shocked Longshot isn't rated single black from its sheer length alone. The rest of the runs here, A-Line, Rio, and Split Tree, are part of the Burnt Mountain Glades. If you're looking for the best tree skiing on the mountain, this is it. These runs hold stashes for days and have some incredibly fun pillows. This is a much larger area than it looks, so no two runs in here are the same. I highly recommend these Burnt Mountain Glades. Lapping them and Longshot is a bit of a chore, however. You'll have to take both Two Creeks and Elk Camp to get back to the start of the hike. In the future, there may be an ultra-long Burnt Mountain high-speed quad that will allow you to lap all of Burnt Mountain's terrain through one lift and avoid the hike, although that's a conversation for another video. Moving back down the mountain, if you take either Adams Avenue or Gallivant, you'll be able to reach the Alpine Springs lift from the gondola. The Alpine Springs pod mainly consists of traditional intermediate cruisers. While I do prefer both Elk Camp and Big Burn to Alpine Springs, this is still an area worth checking out for a couple runs. Of all the intermediate groomer pods at Snowmass, the Alpine Springs runs have the most variable grooming schedule, so make sure to check the grooming report beforehand. The exceptions are Tom's Trace, which is always ungroomed, and Turkey Trot, which is almost always groomed. Tom's Trace is a short and moderately pitched mogul run. It usually has pretty variable snow coverage, but this is a good first ungroomed black to try when progressing. Turkey Trot is a road that leads from Alpine Springs to the Elk Camp area. It's extraordinarily flat right at the top and towards the end, so make sure to retain as much speed as possible. It seems to be getting groomed less frequently these days, but when it is, Naked Lady is my overall favorite run in the Alpine Springs pod. It has some really fun rollers, and in general is a blast to scream down when groomed. The remaining runs, Slider, Lodgepole, Lunkerville, and Granite, are also very enjoyable. Granite is the most isolated run here, so I'd recommend it if you're looking to get away from the crowds. There's also an unmarked mogul run named Arts Ulcer located just lookers right of Log Deck. If you continue down Slider, you'll be forced to go all the way down to the base, so make sure to take either Adams Avenue or Gallivant to return to the Alpine Springs lift. Similarly, Coffee Pot and Granite will take you towards Village Express unless you take this yellow path back to Alpine Springs. It's a groomed road that's essentially the lower half of Coffee Pot. Make sure to get a ton of speed here, as this road is ultra flat. Not sure why it's yellow on the map, but it is indeed a run and takes you to Alpine Springs. Now, Alpine Springs and Elk Camp are generally not too busy, but they definitely get significant lines on peak days. This can be ameliorated by skiing Two Creeks and High Alpine along with certain terrain we'll talk about in Part B. However, over the coming few seasons, both Alpine Springs and Elk Camp are expected to be replaced with new 6-packs, which should help lines. Alright, Finally, let's talk about the high Alpine pod, which services some of the better advanced but not expert runs on the mountain. When it's groomed, the Edge is one of the best steep cruisers on the mountain. It is on rotational grooming, but one of my favorite combinations is to ski the Edge down to any cruiser in the Alpine Springs pod. Of course, this takes 2 lifts to lap, but it's absolutely worth it for the sheer amount of vert you get. If you'd like to get back to the high Alpine lift from the Edge, make sure to start traversing skiers left a bit early on. The remaining runs here, Cookies, Showcase, Riders, and Grinder, are more of your traditional mogul runs. Note that there's some really good tree skiing just lookers right of Riders. Cookies will put you on the wrong side of the Alpine Springs pod, so you'll have to ski down and ride up that lift to get back to high Alpine. Green Cabin is one of the most unique intermediate runs at the resort. This run is directly adjacent to the Cirque and provides an amazing view of that zone. Green Cabin starts off in the Alpine but leads all the way down to the Village Express side. This is a great run to do right at the end of the day. Like the Edge, it is on rotational grooming, so be sure to check the report before you try it. Cirque Dikes leads you from Green Cabin into the Cirque proper. This run isn't really that traveled, so it can be home to some solid stashes, although the terrain here isn't anything that special. Lastly, we'll talk about our first extreme rated line at Snowmass, Rock Band Chute. Rock Band Chute is honestly more of a large area than a singular run. It's located just lookers right of the high Alpine lift and is an ultra steep cliff and tree riddled face. It's not long before you merge onto Green Cabin, but there are several really gnarly lines in this zone. The high Alpine lift is the primary way to access all this hanging valley terrain, but we'll save that for Part C. Well, that's about it for the Elk campsite of Snowmass. Go check out Parts B and C all about the rest of the mountain. A big shout out to Alex Conrad for correctly guessing the mystery clip in Skiing Colorado, The Basics. If you want to be shouted out in a future video just like this, keep an eye out for mystery runs and guess them in the comments. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.